Hello, everyone. Okay, we have this awkward moment from starting the conversation and going to live. I guess we're live now to everybody. Great. Okay, so my name is Mihai. I'm a product manager from Dubai. We have Ezgi on board, who is a product manager from ProductTank Istanbul, and then we have our guest, who is Ryan.
Hi everyone.
Hello everyone.
We are Global ProductTank family. We have been organizing these events since last November with Dubai and the other global chapters. I'm Ezgi from ProductTank Istanbul, and I'm also product manager too. Welcome.
And I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the introduction. I'll briefly say who I am, and then I'll hand it back to Mihai. So my name is Ryan Goldman. I'm your guest today. I'm a product marketer and a marketing leader for, gosh, now over 12 or 13 years. I'm based in the San Francisco Bay Area of California, and I'll tell you more about my experience and the companies for which I've worked once we get started.
Great. Ryan, again, thanks a lot for joining us in this initiative. We've been running ProductTank events for quite a while, but now it's the first time when we're going to talk about product and marketing. So I'm personally super excited to hear more on your experience. And that, as I said on LinkedIn, it's a great way for us and for our community, to push things forward, to get a little bit of knowledge, to see what happens in your region, and at the end to become a little bit better. So really looking forward. We have this. We usually start by asking our audience where are they from, to see how far the message has been spread. We already have 19 people watching. So guys, just please text and say from which region of the world you are, just to see how far did the message go. So let's see what we have. Goodbye. Okay, we have our friend Stefan from Romania. Stefan, greetings. People from Turkey. I'm from Dubai, obviously. Ooh, London, Morocco. Okay, that's quite an audience. So we'll spend a few more minutes to give time for those who are a little bit late, and then we'll jump directly into the talks. In the meantime, another question which we usually like to ask is, Ryan, are there any books that you would recommend for PMs who are at the beginning of their career, or who are in the middle of their career, but they want to push themselves forward?
Well, I wish you would have asked me this beforehand. I would have come with a list. So I tend to like to recommend books that are not specifically about product marketing, product management, marketing, or business. I think that you probably get a lot of recommendations, and whatever bookseller you use, Amazon, probably tells you all the different things that you should buy based on your last purchase. So I tend to think more about where to find insights that can be applied as frameworks to what we do in work that do not necessarily come from the world of work. And the first one that comes to mind is a book I recently read called Raising a Rare Girl. It's a book by an American author and memoirist named Heather Kern Lanier. So you can probably find it under Lanier, L-A-N-I-E-R. She talks about raising a daughter with special needs. And the story is essentially about how you understand or build a framework or build a mental model around the ideas of good and bad, and how they actually make that kind of dichotomy of good and bad makes it more difficult to understand how the world perceives you, your ideas, your work, your efforts, because we can't be right about that most of the time. Good and bad are actually false narratives. The real narrative is relevance and meaning and alignment to some kind of shared goal or objective. And so understanding what it means to get rid of or free our egos of this idea of good and bad, and instead think about where we can actually solve problems or improve ourselves, tends to be a much, much better way to be a manager, be a product manager, be a designer, be a product marketer for sure, be a marketer in general. So that's my recommendation for the day, Raising a Rare Girl. I believe it's only been published in English. And a note, I do know Ms. Lanier. She and I grew up in the same town, but it's a very worthwhile read.
So it's a very interesting narrative, and I also like to sometimes, take a step back, and instead of reading something that's directly related to product management, I want to read something which is doesn't necessarily have a direct connection, but then I'm trying, and I'm listing down also more or less like a question for you. Through learning about that experience, I find ways through which I can make my product manager job and day-to-day activity a little bit better by creating assimilations with that story or with that experience and with my day-to-day activities. Is this something that you find yourself doing as well, or how do you connect that story with what you're doing?
Sure. So, I mean, the fact of the matter is that most people who find themselves in a job already know the basics of doing that job. It's fundamental to basically like getting hired, not being fired, is just transacting against your core goals, understanding, what the priorities are for the business, understanding what the priorities are for your team, and being able to execute. However, in terms of being able to drive leadership and arrive at better outcomes, did I lose you? Arrive at better outcomes, the goal of empathy and understanding the psychology of your audience, understanding the needs, wants, and where value lives for the people around you or the people who are using your product is really impactful. It's really powerful.
Okay, that's a very interesting parallel.
Oh.
Oops, I think we've lost Ryan. We'll have to give it a few minutes. I guess this is a quite regular scenario in today's world.
I can give some book advice to our attendees, and I'm reading this book also. I get screen and Jeff Button's user story mapping. It's really quite book to learning build less features to your MVP, to your customer journey mapping part. It's really helpful for understanding your customer. And second book advises also Marty Chung's Empowered Products Extraordinary People book. It's really cool. You should definitely read this book if you are interested in extraordinary products. And the latest book advises about Christina Botke Radical Focus Product. If you have OKR method, if you have little goals for your sprints, for your quarterly business goals, you should read this book too. If you are a developer, if you are a product manager, if you are a product marketing guy, you should read these 3 books. These books are my favorites. I read this book 4th time these days. Some books that you should really book more times than once. This book like this.
Same for me. Marty Kagan is obviously one of my favorites. Welcome back, Ryan. We've lost you there for a bit. Can you
Sorry about that. I'm not really sure what happened. I can.
Yeah, don't worry. I mean, I guess this was the 2020 most common situation. People dropping and then joining the calls. Huh?
And maybe there is.
Yeah, I can't promise it won't happen again.
Okay, I can write mine.
No, don't worry about it. I mean, we'll if you drop, we'll wait you. We won't continue without you.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess we'll go ahead. We're already 13 minutes into the scheduled time, so I guess we'll go ahead, Ryan, and we'll give you the full stage, and then we'll follow with some Q&A questions at the end, and then yeah, we'll call it a wrap.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me today, and I appreciate it. Again, I can't guarantee I will have technical difficulties. That was an unexpected blip, but hopefully we're through the woods and into the better part. So again, my name is Ryan Goldman. I am based in the United States in the Bay Area of California on the West Coast. I've been a product marketer or a marketing leader for a little bit more than a decade, all here in California. I've worked with companies pretty much across the span of different kinds of businesses. I started my career in product marketing at Cisco, and then I have worked as a product marketing leader, a director at a company called Cloudera that works in the big data and analytics space. Following that, I spent some time at a company called Signal Effects that is now part of Splunk. First, managing their product marketing and then eventually running all of their marketing, and they focus on infrastructure monitoring. And then after that, Sentry, which is a pretty well-known bug monitoring and performance monitoring tool in the open source. And then most recently, a company called Pendo. I think you had another speaker from Pendo not too long ago. I ran their product marketing, and Pendo, interestingly, is a product for product managers. So really understanding the thoughts and the needs and the objectives of the product manager, who's increasingly responsible for the analytics and achievements of the user experience, is close to my heart. Today, I recently joined SoundCloud. So having moved from B2b SaaS enterprise now over to consumer B2C in the music space. I'm a lifelong music lover. I have previously started my own music social network, as well as having been a journalist for a website called Pitchfork, which is now part of Condé Nast. So I think heavily, often, and deeply about music, and it's a joy to now work in the music space and think about the listening experience for users, as well as how artists find an audience and how we use product marketing to achieve that. So briefly, what is product marketing? I like to describe this as where product thinks about the what and the how. So what is the tool that we're going to build? How will the user use it? Product marketing thinks about the who and the why. So understanding the market, so putting more emphasis on the marketing part of the equation and not just the product. Whom are we targeting? Who is this really for? To start, so the best ideas are only good and only able to be qualified if they can find an audience, if they actually solve a problem for users or prospective users. So really being able to look at the entire addressable market and then narrow it down to the people for whom this has the highest likelihood to really hit, to break through, to have impact. The people who can actually measure the benefit from day to day of your innovation, of your new feature, of your new product, of your new pricing package. That's how we understand the who. The ways we do that are pretty mixed, and this is where we start to talk about the difference between B2b marketing versus B2C. So when it comes to B2B marketing, we tend to be able to say there are dollars there almost no matter what if we find an audience. It's just a matter of knowing who has those dollars and being able to say, like, how much are those dollars worth? And when I say dollars, I mean pretty much any kind of budget. So the equation has less to do with finding people who will like this and people who are reachable, and more about where is there either incremental or misspent budget that we can rationalize, because the existing solution to that problem maybe isn't great, or there isn't a solution because the new problem is so new that no one has gone out and tried to address it. When you think about, let's say, Pendo, because many of you have probably heard of Pendo because it's in the context of a past speaker. The problem that Pendo was trying to address was, first and foremost, that products are hard to adopt. That the design can get better and better over time, but the user experience and the way that the user finds insight and finds direction, either during onboarding or even post-onboarding with the addition of new features, is pretty challenging, and that's true of every organization. So being able to understand what is the user's experience as they go through your product, but then also how to act on that, using things like notifications and walkthroughs, that's Pendo's innovation. That's the what. But being able to figure out within that broad scope of B2B, where are the sub-verticals? Where are the use cases? Where are the problems that have budget attached to them? That's how you identify the who. And so the ways you drive those insights tend to be by essentially looking at the market. You can look at, looking at, not the market, looking at the behaviors of customers. You can see who's spending money on what things. They tend to be pretty open about what tooling they use. They tend to present at talks, so you can listen to the YouTube videos or the podcast where people talk through like what they've done in the past. There's also analysts. So the organizations like Gartner and Forrester tend to have a pretty good read on what kinds of problems and what kind of budget is attached to different kinds of problems. And so that's a good way to get started in terms of like qualifying the audience for your idea or for your product. Another great way is to take down all the barriers to adoption. So if you're able to deliver a product to market in a very inexpensive and very accessible way, this kind of drives the idea of product-led growth. And this is where kind of marketing, product marketing and product management come together a little bit. So making something truly free to see exactly who's willing to use this. That's a great way to start. For the consumer side, understanding the who is a little bit more complicated because the product marketer's responsibility then is to say the cost, the budget there is much, much different. So we have to be able to drive a much bigger audience, which is only a portion of a much bigger addressable market. So the way we do that tends to be things like surveys and market research. So going out into the world and asking questions, doing interviews even to understand, okay, what is the biography? What is the narrative? What is the story behind the type of audience we're trying to reach? Once we have all those insights, since we're able to package it up, the product marketer's responsibility then is to say, okay, here is a little bit of data, a little bit of narrative that basically puts together a persona, a target audience. Personas have kind of a bad name to some extent. The historical definition of persona felt a little bit soft because it was sort of like a story. We would say Nate the builder, or Andrea the marketer, or Don the dog walker, and then say, okay, they walk dogs, they live in California, or they live in London. Today's idea for product marketing around the persona or the target audience is a little bit more detailed, it's a little more nuanced. On the B2B side, you tend to want to say, what other tools do they use? What does their stack look like? On the consumer side, you tend to want to say, how do they spend their time? What other similar products in this space are taking up their time? Where are we going to try and drive a change? On the Y side, it's a little bit more into the weeds of product marketing. It's less research oriented, it's less data oriented, and it's more kind of where the art of product marketing comes into play. If we've already identified what the product is, the feature set, the design, and we know how it's supposed to be used, documentation or walkthroughs, videos. The challenge then becomes, how do you actually get people to use it? When you describe the product, you tend to talk about what's great about it from the perspective of the inside out. I built it, my team built it, we know why we built it, we know what it's for in terms of how it works in the context of your day-to-day or your job. But where is value there? understanding how a user or a buyer will ultimately derive some kind of measurable impact in their lives or in their work is really the challenge that product marketing has. I know that product management sometimes addresses this through exercises like the Amazon PR, where before they even start to design or scope out their idea, they write the press release for bringing it to market. It's a fantastic approach. It breaks down some of the mental barriers and some of the assumptions, but it's not enough. When you're actually starting to build the strategy by which you're going to put the product into the hands of the right people, you've already gone through that who exercise to figure out who it is. When you want to put it in the hands of the right people, the challenge then becomes understanding the value proposition such that you're able to rationalize how they spend their time, how they spend their money, how this fits into their opportunity costs, so the things that they would do otherwise, and then build your messaging based on that positioning. So positioning is ultimately the understanding of not only for whom is this product, but why is it important to them? How will they actually use it, not technically and tactically, but how will they actually fit it into their lives and be able to rationalize its value against everything else they could be doing instead? Where are they going to see some kind of benefit or impact? And then the messaging is, okay, based on the combination of whom you're targeting, the who, and the why of the value proposition or positioning, how do you describe it? What's the plan for actually telling the right people with the right words why they should care, and then driving that adoption behavior? This is where product marketing comes in. We really take responsibility for the go-to-market. When I say go-to-market, it's first the positioning, then the messaging, and then ultimately building the plan for actually delivering it into the marketplace, and then driving those data points, those analytic insights that the product manager really cares about. So adoption, retention, stickiness. These are all things, conversion if it's a free tool to paid. These are all things that the product marketer also worries about. They also think about, because frankly, if the product is not in the right place for the right audience, with the right packaging and pricing, the right messaging, then you're potentially lost. So the product marketer then becomes the bridge between the product and either the sales organization in the case of B2B, or the consumer, the marketplace in the case of B2C. So they will partner not only with people like brands, demand generation, growth, to make sure that they have control over the right channels, the right moments, the right places, but that also we're able to test some of our assumptions, right? Product marketers are just like product managers in that they have some hypotheses, but they have to be able to test them. So when we build that messaging, we want to have different varieties, different things to test against each other, and then look at data to see what works best, and then invest more into the things that have the highest impact. Those are strategies that the product marketer entrusts with their partners. And then ultimately with sales, if you're in the B2B space, the product marketer's responsibility is then training the sales organization, enabling them to actually bring that tool, product, service to market to their customers. Whether it's a net new customer that they're able to identify has this need, or an upsell or cross-sell to an existing customer. The real need for product marketing isn't so much to execute the sale, because there are salespeople for that. It's to be able to say, what is the framework by which you're going to be able to identify and evaluate the need on behalf of your customer, and take down as much of that friction as possible, so that you're able to tell them as a consultant almost, as opposed to a salesperson, and ask the right kinds of questions to discover why they need this, how it fits, whether or not they're willing to pay for it, and what the opportunity cost is, so that you're able to price it correctly. That is fundamentally, where product marketing starts. From day to day, we tend to be really closely tied to the product management organization, so that we understand what the roadmap is. The last thing you want is for product marketing to only pick up the go-to-market in the very, very stages once the product has already been built. because that leaves you with a period of not being able to do anything with it. Even if the product is great and it's been tested, and you have a clear sense of like its value, if the product marketing team is not ready to execute in the market with that kind of research and planning and partnership, then you probably find yourself in a situation where it's going to take too long. So it's really key to be able to partner with product marketing so that they have early visibility and they can start building out the plan and the go-to-market strategy well before you're ready for general availability and feature release. And in a lot of cases, especially on the consumer side, the product marketing team's responsibility is not only for building launches around specific releases, because frankly, you're always updating the features, you're always updating the experience. Product marketing can also focus on that larger narrative for how do you create a story that's thematic and relevant to your audience, that differentiates your brand and your position in the market compared to all other consumer goods that are like it, so that the barriers to adoption, the barriers to readiness are already taken down. And then ultimately you land the new feature releases, the new feature and product launches into that narrative. You actually kind of break down the barriers before you start to sell. So recently I'll think of a lot of the social media companies are building out their creator to fan strategies. So you see a lot of companies like Twitter and Clubhouse saying, okay, we haven't released it yet, but we're going to provide new and better ways for fans, consumers, to generate revenue directly back to the artists and creators who are doing the work. So that's tipping, that's through like super likes, where you only have a limited number and you can buy more. It's really kind of like how do you cut through and build to that one-on-one relationship between the consumer and the creator. Those features haven't been released, but companies like Twitter and Clubhouse are beginning to tell the story about them. In my opinion, they're a little on the nose right now because they're just basically describing the features, describing the tools and the products before they've been released, as opposed to creating that larger narrative about like, why do they matter? What's the fundamental change that we're observing in the marketplace so that these things are needed in the first place? What are the examples that we see around us that indicate that like this is going to be valuable to their users and to their audience, so that they can actually focus on the right kind of momentum, so that when the features are released, that energy, that excitement, that enthusiasm, and most importantly, that readiness is already in place. We'll talk a little bit about the difference between brand and product marketing for a moment. They work together closely, but brand tends to be about like your corporate experience. How do you capture the voice and the vibe of the customer? How do you kind of keep up with the trend in terms of their lives and their behaviors, their interests? That we usually see that in design elements, coloring, some elements of packaging, and then corporate messaging. Product marketing is invested in that, and it's responsible for influencing it to some extent. But product marketing's real focus is on less abstract, more specific. How do we actually articulate value when it comes to products and features? And then how do we actually make sure that there's truth there so that the features are well set up to be adopted in the first place? Then looking downstream after the features have been adopted, how do we continue to drive that engagement, and how do we actually develop insight and gather feedback into what's next? So this is a real important point where product marketing does have some responsibility for working with product management to influence the roadmap. Not in terms of like, hey, here's a feature that you should build because we perceive some gap in our existing tooling. Not that, but instead saying, we actually are hearing from the marketplace that they have enthusiasm and readiness around this experience. The positioning that we're using is actually indicating back to us that we should lean into it more. So how do we abstract away from this positioning actual features, product experiences that will support it, so that the product management has a little bit of insight to the voice of the customer, to the larger why objectives, like what is this for, before they start to ideate on what comes next in the roadmap. That is strictly different from the role of the brand organization. Brand isn't looking at how do we influence the roadmap. They're mostly looking at how do we reflect the spirit, engagement, and differentiation of our product in the market among our customers and our observers. So I'm going to take a break there. I know that there's going to be a lot of questions, probably about SoundCloud. I didn't talk too much about SoundCloud, but I'm happy to answer some questions there. But also about the differences between product marketing, product management, how I've worked with them, the differences between B2B and B2C. So I'll, I think, invite Mihai and Ezgi back.
We are here.
Yes, we are back. It's quite, it's a very interesting. I was looking for this kind of conversation for a while now. I've prepared a question which I want to I want to pick your brains on it. So usually when you are in the very initial stage of your startup, you do have to make a lot of product discovery, and you do have to validate a lot of assumptions and a lot of stories on which you later on you base pretty much all of the user stories and development. Is this part of product marketing one way or another, or it's not necessarily related? Or product marketing only comes after you've reached product market fit and then you're going to scale?
This is such a great question. And I'm glad that you asked in the context of startups. So my perspective is, just like anything, product marketing is not only for product marketers. Just like DevOps is not only for DevOps managers. Depends on the state of your organization and whom you've hired. So in a company where, like you said, you're kind of validating the early ideas, validating the early investments in software development and product packaging, the chances are that you won't have a product marketer or even any marketer to do that work. Similarly, when it comes to managing the workflows of production, you're not going to have a DevOps toolkit or people to do that work. So the developer, or the product manager in some cases, has to take on that responsibility. They have to kind of like flex their way into these product marketing skills. So I will say, absolutely, every single company, no matter the stage, if they have 2 people, if they have 2,000 people, there is some responsibility for doing product marketing. And my reasoning is not only to validate that your idea is good, but before you even build against that idea, to ask the question, what's the ROI? Like I said, product marketing is a view of the market, not of the product necessarily. The product comes first, but the market actually precedes it in terms of the ability to actually imagine some kind of return on making the investment. Opportunity cost is usually the bottom line. So product marketing thinking says, okay, we have this idea for a product that either doesn't exist, or the solution that it's addressing is bad. Like the solutions that exist in the market don't do the job. So we're going to build something better. But then the product marketing thinking is, okay, what's the likelihood of people paying for that? There are a lot of cases where a bad solution is actually the best solution, because the willingness and the appetite of the user, of the customer, to make a change is extremely low. There are other scenarios where the solution has almost nothing to do with the product itself and everything to do with the workflow in which it sits. And the difficulty of creating a behavior change is really, really hard. And that's where product marketing really comes in, to kind of answer those questions and then to say, if we're going to carry forward, what do we need to say? Whom do we need to find? How do we actually validate in terms of driving that behavior change, in terms of driving the behavior that increases adoption and willingness to not only use, but also pay for it. So those product marketing mental frameworks are really key for every organization. And they're actually skills that a good CEO, a good founder will have or will be able to learn. A lot of CEOs, I won't name any names, but I've worked with a lot of CEOs, technical founders, who always say, our product is so good, it'll be really easy to sell it. Well, kind of, but that means you're only selling to the people who have latent demand. If you're actually going to build a business as opposed to just a product, then you actually have to think through, like, how do you influence the behavior change? How do you understand where the demand comes from and why people are willing to pay to resolve it? So that's really where product marketing thinking comes from.
And then you've mentioned yourself that the difference between let's say fully dedicated product manager and a product marketing person. How are their responsibilities different? And they, at the end of the day, they do report. One of them reports into the head of product, and the other one reports into head of marketing. Or
okay, so operationally, that's an unanswered question. So I've been in situations where marketing is part of the product organization too. So at Signal FX, for example, when I joined, marketing was its own function, product was another function. Product marketing actually sat under product, not under marketing. It depends on the way you see the management of your company, the way you see your go-to-market as tied to your feature development and release. It can live in either one. It really depends on how you're going to, like, where you want the friction to be, right? If you want the friction to be between product and go-to-market, and that friction can be really healthy, because you want the product marketer to focus more on customer and sales enablement, then it's great to have product marketing in the marketing organization, or even in the sales organization in some cases. If you want the friction to be between the product and the customer, then you want your product marketers sometimes to be inside of the product organization, because understanding that friction, understanding, like, where the potential challenges and risks are, is a good exercise for product marketing. So actually emphasizing those obstacles can be really, really beneficial. However, for most organizations that hit any kind of size, that are past, like, the early stage startup phase, you tend to see product marketing as part of the marketing organization.
Okay. Eski, you want to add anything? Because otherwise I will then I'll leave it a list of questions which I need.
Okay. I ask one question. You said that we are creating story while we are working on product marketing part. Before the compared business side, like our competitors. I don't want to give any example for your competitors, but if you could give us a specific case, for example, let's say you are creating personalization feature on SoundCloud. How do you push your personalization feature? As just thinking about, like, titles of your checklist, product launch checklist, just a little bit, how can I say, a little bit example to our attendees. I think our attendees like real cases. Just
Sure.
say.
Sure. So yeah, so this is a really key question. Differentiation is at the heart of product marketing. And I won't talk about personalization necessarily, but when I think about SoundCloud versus other digital streaming platforms, knowing why people use it, who those people are, and then being able to emphasize that difference is really important. So, for example, Spotify, Apple Music, they're clearly the leaders in terms of the number of paying customers. They're not the leaders in terms of users, they're not the leaders in terms of most tracks, but in terms of paying customers. And so if you think about the behaviors of your average paying customer at scale for a company like Apple, not just Apple Music, but Apple, the type of music and the type of experience they want is with superstar artists, catalogs, and really easy interface. They want their user experience to be seamless. That is the brand that Apple has always had. And so the emphasis there is on building the smoothest, best designed workflow within the app, and making sure that it is the easiest possible to find the music that seems to need just awareness. Like basically the types of catalog tracks, the types of superstar tracks that make your average user happy. When it comes to personalization, that comes down to like recommendation engines and algorithms and things like that. So I won't go into it with it. Yeah, with how you name that, I don't know. When it comes to SoundCloud, though, if you think about it, the type of user that we're trying to please, that we're trying to engage, is looking for what's new. They're looking for something that is cool and different before it's even known. And so our user experience is going to be less focused on the interface necessarily for the consumer, and more focused on the interface and the value proposition to the creator. Not permanently, but like we're just talking about the past few years, right? During this period when Apple Music has launched, when Spotify has become a dominant force in the music industry, being able to actually create a way for independent artists, for artists who are not the biggest in the world, to be able to be discovered is actually a great experience, a great outcome, a great benefit to the average SoundCloud user. People will pay for that because they don't always want to hear the music that they already know on repeat through the smoothest possible interface. Sometimes they want to make sure that they're hearing something completely new and different from minute to minute. And so the emphasis on how to like build that narrative into the market so that ultimately the user, the person who's most likely to buy, knows it going in so that they're happy, that they don't end up using the wrong service because it's just the one that's most well known and tied to the Apple brand, is really important. And making sure that those value propositions are brought to the front drives consumer behaviors in the end.
Thanks, Ryan. It's really helpful for us.
We have a question from Hossam. So what do you think is the common cause of the friction between product marketing, management, and marketing?
Oh, wow. Thank you for the question, Hossam. The most common frictions tend to be that product marketing often will see itself as part of the product and feature development process. And they'll want to be involved in all of the ideation, all the planning, because they represent the perspective of the market, the use of the customer. That's hard, because when it comes down to it, it's maybe not true. This gets to my point about like having two parallel paths that happen at the same time. If product marketing is involved in trying to remove all of the friction from the consumer experience by representing the market, then what they're doing is basically like inserting themselves into small niches within the product management process, and assuming that the product management process has not done its job of understanding why people use features and how to design features for the best possible outcomes. Instead, the product marketer should be thinking about, okay, if the product management team is doing its job well and building the right kind of roadmap, building the right kind of feature in collaboration with the engineering team, how do we make sure what they're delivering actually finds value and finds its audience? And then we can ultimately influence their thinking on the next time based on the insights that we derive from that investigation, from that go-to-market. On the other side, product management creates friction with product marketing by often not having the trust that they need to offer for how product marketing articulates opportunity cost, value proposition. Product management tends to really want to live in the, like, it's awesome, we're building it for the right reasons, it's going to be way better than anything else that they've ever used before, and talk about features. Tell people, just tell that we've announced it. Spend as much money and time as you need to get on every billboard, on every television, on every radio station, so that people know that it's there and they'll adopt it. That tends to undersell this idea that there is nuance and there is particularity and drive in the way the market accepts, embraces, and uses products. So product management's real neither is to trust the product marketer more, that like this idea of sometimes narrowing the scope, narrowing the market, focusing on the outcome messaging as opposed to the feature messaging is the right way, even for a technical buyer, even for a developer, even for a product manager who's ultimately your audience. There is a real difference there.
But I guess, I mean, in the end, product marketing, because they are so close to the customer, they can be seen as a new channel or as a separate channel through which you can get the sense of your features, get the sense of what you're building directly from your users, right? So that's why maybe product marketing, they might feel entitled to drive or like to have too much of an input in what you are deciding what you build next.
Right, and so this is part of my perspective, right? It's a collaboration.
Yeah.
It's a two-way street in terms of responsibility, but both teams have to kind of cut down on that entitlement. I mean, this is true of not just product management and product marketing. Everyone should cut down on their entitlement. I hear in the workplace a lot this idea of owner. I own this part of the work stream. I own that part of the work stream. When we say own, we should stop talking about exclusive rights, like this idea of entitlement that Mihai is pointing out. Entitlement's a really bad thing to have no matter what your role is. Instead, it should be accountability. Ownership should be about accountability. Like, can I actually solve this problem the best at the greatest scale with the greatest reliability on repeat? Because if I can't, then I shouldn't own it. I can help, I can contribute, but I shouldn't own it. I should find the things where I can hold accountability and drive outcomes. And that's a really key way of thinking about, especially as we're all remote right now, and we can't kind of have these like live conversations. Really rationalizing where we claim ownership and entitlement to only the things that we can actually benefit the organization and the market the most.
That's a very interesting point that you've mentioned right there, and I agree with you. However, don't you think there should be one person who has let's say the overall ownership, but that doesn't mean that this person can decide by themselves, but shouldn't be there one lead who is always like the head of the pyramid? Because what I've seen this quite enough. If nobody has ownership, then everybody believes they have ownership, and then it just can become, a little bit fuzzy in terms of who's deciding in the end. And right. I think there's a lot of subjectivity in how do you approach this, but I'm just curious on your opinion on it.
Yeah, I mean, but what you're talking about is pyramids, right, as opposed to just bricks, right? You should. Okay.
Yeah.
The pyramid and not the brick, right? So if it comes to what is the product roadmap, what are the timelines, what is the rationalization and the progress of the features, what are the metrics by which we're going to measure success, what is the kind of like scope of research that we're going to conduct, user research, in order to get those things right, that's owned by the product organization. That pyramid has to be owned by the product organization. Sure, there might be bricks that the product marketer contributes. There might be bricks that brand contributes or sales, but the pyramid is absolutely owned by the product organization. Similarly, the go-to-market, the actual execution of the product or tool into the buying space or the adoption space, that's product marketing's responsibility. They have to own that pyramid. They should own elements of packaging and pricing. That all goes together. Absolutely. The product organization, product managers, product designers, engineers should have bricks in that pyramid, but ultimately the pyramid is owned by product marketing.
Okay, fair enough. We have one question for PCX04. Let me just put it on the screen. So isn't product management and product marketing go hand in hand to deliver right product for right customer? And yeah, I'm quite interested on this one as well, to see is there a limit, or like is like a very flexible limit, or how do they interconnect?
Yeah, so it's the chicken and egg. I don't know if you have this expression where you live, but the chicken and egg problem comes first.
Yeah.
So we talked about this a little bit during my talk. Everyone on the product management organization, as well as the CEO and founders, should have a little bit of product marketing in their head, because it's very possible to build the right product for the wrong audience. You could build the best possible thing. You could build the Ferrari when the roads haven't already been built. Like, what the heck do you do with the world's best supercar where there are no roads? So the context matters, the opportunity cost matters, the use case and the workflow matter, the willingness and ability to adopt all matter. That said, once the product roadmap is in place and development sprints have started, it then becomes the responsibility of product marketing to figure out how to execute that into the right audience as opposed to all of the audience. So this comes back to the idea of shrinking the total addressable audience down to the people who will have the highest and least expensive uptake, because most organizations don't have unlimited budget. Most companies aren't Apple. Apple Music has an installed base of Apple products users. They can easily, including iTunes, they can easily execute into that audience at any given time with any given new product or feature. But most companies don't have that privilege. They don't have that luxury. So it's the responsibility of product marketing to say, I understand the product roadmap well enough and I understand the market well enough that I am going to be able to come up with a hypothesis about not only where this fits, but why it fits there, and how do we make sure that fit is absolutely clear among the audience that we believe it is relevant for. That said, iteration is really key. And so growth is the next stage. So while you do that like really tightly fit, first stage of execution into market for go-to-market, part of product marketing's responsibility, as well as product management, is to observe, okay, who else? What are the other use cases? What are the other value propositions that we haven't focused on, but we're actually reading from the behaviors and the responses of the market so that we can then pivot and expand to make sure that we're incrementally adding the next consumer segment with the least possible cost. It's an ongoing process. You just want to make sure you're not trying to be so generic and so full of platitudes that you're saying, hey, this product is great. All I need to do is just like buy advertising and people will find it. That's almost never the case.
Yeah, I guess that's the shortcut, right? You just pay a little bit for the advertising and hope hope it will work too. Okay, there are two more questions, and we are after that. I think we're going to close because we are reaching to 1 hour. The first one is going to be from the digital architect. So you've mentioned that product marketing is more about market than about the product. Do we take a different consideration in the case of emerging markets?
That's a great question. So I will say no, and here's why. For expanding footprints from a core market into an emerging market, if you're talking about like expansion as opposed to launch, then it's usually not easy enough, but it's usually we're usually able to build some hypotheses based on either early observation of an MVP. So if you've released your free version of the product into that market and seen how people respond, as opposed to trying to drive revenue from it, or if you're able to say, hey, I'm actually choosing which emerging market I'm going to launch into, because you're not going to launch into all the emerging markets at the same time. So trying to choose which one is the most like the market you already sell into, it's a market challenge as opposed to a product challenge. From the perspective of choosing an emerging market or being in an emerging market and launching in the first place, I tend to think that it's not really that much different from a product marketing perspective. You still have to figure out within your market, whether it's emerging or mainstream, how does this fit? So if you're in California and you're trying to launch for the first time in Guatemala, let's say, then you can't make those assumptions based on your local market. You actually have to do the research in Guatemala. You have to understand the marketing dynamics. You have to understand the demand. You have to understand the kind of ecosystem around the product itself. So that's still driven by not product. So I'd say the responsibility of product marketing thinking and product marketers is to still look at the market first, whether you already have a product to launch or you're trying to build for the market itself.
Okay.
Thanks, Ryan. And I think we need to take latest questions. Maybe you could give your blogs, links, or have you got any blog about the product and product marketing topic that you are writing on?
So I don't have a blog that I'm writing, and there aren't any that come to mind right away as top recommendations. I mean, so for product management, I like ProductCraft, which is you've probably heard that one before. It's great. It involves some elements of product marketing. It involves some elements of growth marketing and growth management.
Which one is it? Can you? I didn't get it.
ProductCraft, ProductCraft.
ProductCraft. Okay.
And any advice about our attendees improve their product management skills or product marketing skills? Do you have any advice?
Yeah, I like this question from Varun about how product managers can leverage the insights of their product marketing folks. I think that's a great question to end on. So I'd say, product managers should challenge product marketers, right? I think that there's a tendency for product marketers to deliver the plan and share it with their product. Like, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? I think product managers can better understand how to kind of build a better relationship and to build deeper insight by then asking the product marketer, how did you even build this plan? What frameworks of thinking were you using? How did you approach understanding the market? What were the questions that you asked yourself? What were the hypotheses? When it comes down to it, product management and product marketing shouldn't be that much different in terms of how they approach problems, right? They're different in terms of like their data that they use and the execution of the solution, but the way of thinking really comes down to understanding a problem and taking the time to say, where are we going to get the most impact for our investment? And so product managers should challenge product marketers to answer those questions. Product marketers similarly should challenge product managers to answer those questions. Now we'll kind of easily find that we are drawing from the same well in the end. So that's how I'd say take more advantage of your product marketers is by asking them deeper questions.
Yeah, and nowadays I couldn't imagine that product managers haven't got any product marketing skills or product marketing approach. I couldn't imagine that because you need to create your MVP as soon as possible to entering the market, and you need product marketing skills also. How do you put your KPIs, methods? I didn't or I couldn't imagine this. Thanks, Ryan. Good answer.
Sure. Absolutely. And to all you product marketing leaders out there, take Ezgi's advice, use KPIs, use OKRs. Even though you don't necessarily own the data, you should still think about the data and make those your North Star.
Cool. Ryan, thanks a lot. I highly appreciate giving 1 hour of your time to share with us some of the advices that you've done today. Yeah, thanks a lot again, and then we look forward to talk with you again in the future.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks
Bye.
for your time.